Thank you for joining this panel discussion. We have only 45 minutes to discuss the challenges of digital transformation and carbon footprint reduction. And without delay, welcome our guests, Philippe Renier, CEO of Tech Publica, Ingo Franz. Ingo is founder and managing partner at Vector Pilot from Germany. Philippe Herbert, investor, president of the mission 5G for Industry, and France 2030 ambassador, and Paul Pinot, VP, IoT, platform and market strategy at Braincube. I'm your timekeeper and moderator for this roundtable, and I count on you to ask questions for the panelists. Philippe, you have extensive experience in public affairs for digital branch at La Poste and Huawei. You were a rapporteur of national strategy for the digital inclusion of the French Digital Agency and strongly involved in the think tank Renaissance Numérique. Would you like to share with us the three challenges and the levers of the digital transformation for industry, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. So, thank you very much. So, as an introduction, I will share with you a few insights and observations on the modernization, decarbonization, and digitalization of industry. So, because this is the threefold challenge we have to face if we want to be back in the race. Okay. So, my first slide is about speeding up modernization. I just want to mention, for instance, the first graph. If we take China, for instance, the industrial development is more recent and therefore use more modern machines. Then, in a context of accelerating robotization, not to deal with Industry 4.0, there is a clear risk of a delay that could be difficult to catch up with. I have when I was in Hong Kong, I discussed with, for instance, the general manager of the port of Hong Kong, and he told me he's about to be performed by the automated port of Shenzhen that is fully 5G implemented. That's an example of the competition with automated robots and advanced robotization. For France, 163 robots installed for 10,000 employees has accelerated, but remains far from Germany with almost 400 robots, but also behind Spain or Italy. Last point is the expense of machine and equipment is up 3 or 4 times less in France than Italy or Germany. The second graph shows an industrial growth dynamic of Asia region versus Americas and Europe. So my point here is robots installed plus growing dynamic in Asia is a warning for French policymakers who already have dedicated special funds from the recovery plan and state aids. We were dealing with it previously to support this investment. But to put it in another way, before dealing with Industry 4.0, let's assume we're already late in the Industry 3.0. So the second big challenge is, of course, decarbonization of the industry. The point is, the industry represents almost 20% of carbon footprint, whereas it's only 10% of GDP in France versus 20% in Germany. When adding our imports, we reach almost 50% of our CO2 emission. Imports are obviously a direct cause of 20 years of deindustrialization in France. So we identify 4 levers of decarbonization, which is the first one is, of course, energy efficiency, which was the first move faced to the energetic crisis. In the long run, however, it has been decreasing almost continuously for the past 20 years. The second lever is electrification and energy mix, of course. The challenge is to reduce the use of gas and oil and going electric or renewable. And the last one is related to carbon capture, but here I think we are not very developed in France as we benefit from a highly decarbonized energy. Beyond level, Industry 4.0 contributes to decarbonization that it reduces energy consumption, raw material and waste, of course, but it will be my next slide. Or the fourth one. So the third point is about digitalization, digital for transformation of industry. So, sorry, it's very basic finding, but when you write a lack of culture of innovation and industry, it's kind of an experience during 10 last years that French people are not innovation front-runners, neither tech early adopter, just to quote the 5G implementation in France that led to too many debates, why, what for, when.
It's good to be controversial.
And with good and less relevant question. On the other hand, 5G applications are mainly B2B uses, and they do almost 0 latency and 10 times better performance versus 4G, creates great opportunities for 5G, of course. And we will see that with Philippe soon. Yet, things have been, of course, accelerating, and positive externality of lockdown due to COVID show it. So the imperative move for Industry 4.0, because without Industry 4.0, there will be no reindustrialization in France. French industry must now rapidly incorporate digital solutions, otherwise a delay will be irrecoverable. And France will increase its negative trade balance. Remember, it's minus 80 billion euros because of its low ratio of make versus buy. That will be the end of the game because we will never compete with the cost of labor in China, for instance. So I'm not tech solutionist, but technology is a part of the solution for industry. Technology is, for me, is science and metrics. It brings intelligence, what we call smart, and from data collection to data analytics, it improves process, quality, efficiency, and of course, saves energy. So adopting technology, if I had to mention 2 use cases, because the important, of course, is not technology, it's how it transforms things and process. The first one is a use case that is a very small scale with a camera connected with locally on edge computing with machine learning that delivers up to 97% of reliability to sort waste or basic manufactured products such as nuts and bolts. But very simple to measure the ROI and very local. The second example I want to quote is the experience of smart port or smart mine that I saw in China, where cranes are remotely controlled with 5G technologies are considerably improve productivity, but also security. That's why the government financed a lot to help because there was a lot of incidents. So my last point about ecosystem. So it's the key word today, and I completely approve the necessity of ecosystems. But let's say I said it's not enough because I think we've done a lot and French policymakers have done a lot to gather the ecosystem between industry players, between policy, between professional organization, R&D and academics, but also more recently digital services provider. But we have a strategic committee led by the GD of the Ministry of Economy, which is a great thing that gather verticals like industry, wood, water, and so on. But we also have transversal, like waste, like digital infrastructures, or industry of the future. So the goal is cooperation, fair enough, and it works. But beyond cooperation, we need deep tech players to cooperate with industry to make it 4.0. IDEDG, led by National Acceleration Strategy, to build consortium and finance project on AI, cloud, industry 5G, cybersecurity, or control. And great projects have arisen. Yet program and ecosystem remain really complex organization and difficult to navigate in. Norway can help on this topic, but I think we could improve on not leasability but readability. Because it's difficult for a player to understand what person or what door to knock at. So key learning from France New, it's a program also led by the DGE on the digitalization of SMEs in France. And I think it's a good example because we face difficult stuff and maybe we could avoid but the difficulties we met in France to operate this digitalization. It's how we go at the most local point in the territory and how we respond with the appropriate tools, appropriate discourse, appropriate help to solve their concrete and really concrete problems. And in that, to this point, I think that Campus Fab Lab are really relevant and great example to show a concrete use case for smart industry. So for me, necessity to gain three ideas. The idea of a unique desk with territorial relay to deliver digital culture program, long-term investment support, and digital turnkey solutions. So that's my proposal. And just to conclude this threefold challenge of modernization, decarbonization, and digitalization is huge and critical. Huge because it's the future of the European and French industry, which is at stake, and critical because it's now on air. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Philippe. Ingo, you come from Germany. You are a specialist in venture capital. You have managed dozens of VC investments and build up transactions with focus on digital and high tech as an investor and board member. And you also support corporates in entering external venture and setting up joint venture. Would you like to shed some light on trend in the German digital startup market and expectation of the investors, please?
Thank you. And honored to be part of the panel. Is this working? Yes. So I think the first thing you have to understand about Germany is there's a messe, or trade fair for everything. So if you talk about industry and the future of industry, I would invite you to visit the Hannover Messe. And I think so that's not as strategic and a great speech as we heard in the beginning next door, which I really adore, to really listen to some strategic thinking. But if you go to Hannover Messe, you will find exactly the topics that you mentioned. But I would say already in implementation. So Hannover Messe is about Industry 4.0, the digitization of the industry. It's about energy management. So these are the headlines of Hannover Messe. It's about the application of KI, so AI, in data platforms. And what did I miss? It's about carbon neutral manufacturing. That's it. So that's what I would call implementation. So, and you can mirror that into the startup area, because all these topics are looking into the future, and it gives the perspective where startups can work. Because we all remind startups are not about building themselves the manufacturing assets, but they are actually catalyzers to work on these topics much faster. And if you look from an investor's standpoint, I would say you can see in all these topics, you can see these, let's say, speedboats, small companies. What is the difference if you compare it to other areas of pure digital investing? Is basically that all these topics don't work as a standalone. So there's no B2C aspect actually in this industrial investing. So, and that's, I think, one stronghold of Germany. If I compare it to the structure in Germany, in France, you see a lot of unconventional investors. That's on one side. You will not see probably a single corporate that doesn't have a corporate investment activity. And you have this huge group of, I would say, unconventional investors, which are families, which are family-owned businesses, which, by the way, contribute probably about 50% of the investment, in addition to venture investment. And one of the key differences to France is also that there are specialized VC funds, which actually are open to invest in industrial technology. Actually, there's one or two actually newly raised, which say we want to invest in the future of industrial tech. So I don't want to go to it in detail, which are the single areas of investment. I just want to raise 2 or 3 categories, which is one which always existed. It's, let's say, hardware investment, so really deep tech innovations in certain areas of materials or whatsoever. Interesting stuff, which is coming a lot from institutes and so on, spin-offs from Fraunhofer and so on. But which is the majority is the second category, which is the application of new digital paradigms to existing problems. So, and that's the big space where startups have been active in the last 10 years, and we have been doing for ECA, we have been doing a lot of mappings. What are the new startups in robotics, no-code programming, in data platforms, in edge computing, whatever. And one thing I see as a big topic now is the discussion about carbon. So, and that's also something where you see a lot of startups emerging. And the point is, this is understood. And there's already a kind of ecosystem now in Germany where startups can actually find their industrial partners to bring the solutions to the market. I know a little bit the market in France. The structures are not so different, But I think the only difference is that you have this established kind of structure of mid-sized companies who have been active in investment and also driving, adopting startup ideas in their area. I had the opportunity to actually mount one company, the digital company next to a Mittelstand, let's say, industrial company, and that's, I think, a good example. And it may be that in this case there is a certain, let's say, time difference to France. I think all the elements are there in France, but in some instances there are a couple of years where the industry has started to kind of push this aspect earlier in Germany because it was in the scope. That's the German DNA, manufacturing. And France is on the other side is kind of coming from a little bit deindustrialized thing, but pushing very hard. So this is my take on the structure.
Thank you so much. Philippe, in the last 15 years, you invested in more than 25 companies. You were a founder, member of the Pass French Tech. Pass French Tech is a hyper-growth program, startup program. And with the French private equity investor associated, France Invest, you managed the Industry Formation Commission for 4 years. And then we are nominated president of the Mission 5G industry. And last but not least, you have been appointed as France 2030 ambassador since May 2012. What is your vision of the digital ecosystem in France, and what do you see the evolution for the industrial 5G industry 4.0 and 5.0?
Okay, it's fast, but okay, I accept the challenge. First of all, I would like to acknowledge all the challenges which have been mentioned since the beginning of this session, but I consider them as also opportunities. Honestly, big opportunities, and what I would like to present to you is these opportunities in terms of the innovation that the French ecosystem can bring to the table, and that's what we want to stimulate with the France 2030 particularly, but also behind that we want to take that as an opportunity to go directly to, you mentioned Industry 5.0, and I would like also to share that with you. A lot of people are saying that yes, we are still moving from 3.0 to 4.0. Why not going directly to something which is maybe the next generation, but at least when we are building the new industry or the reindustrialization, as we say in France, we should do it with the tools and the means and the organization of the future. And that's very important because it gives a perspective a little bit differently. It doesn't mean that we make tabula rasa from the existing, but we should really revisit a lot of the existing plans, organizations. So with this future organization, with the network of the future, and you mentioned the 5G. For me, 5G is a mean. It's not a new technology that we add on top of that. No, it's part of that. And these elements, these are elements that France 2030 would like to stimulate, obviously, the innovation. There is a lot of funding globally, which is organized behind that. Now the difficulty is to put the priorities and also to have the different level of companies. I would say we talk a lot about the startup, which are the innovation of the future, but I would like also to remind you that there is a lot of small and medium company which are very innovative in this industrial field. Each time I go on the territoire industry in France, we discover that there is locally leaders, even maybe on small niche, but very important in terms of technology, and these are also very important company to support and to help, to structure, to organize, because the leverage on this company is much stronger and much quicker. We both have been working on the investor side. We know that this is good to have startups stimulate the ecosystem, but I would say the ratio of success is as it is, and I think that we cannot only play with this part of the ecosystem. We have to play with the small and medium business companies, particularly in the industry, which is a long-term strategic business or company or financial success. And this is important to have that in mind. The startup, small, medium, and business, and also obviously the large company. Obviously, when you see the level of investment which is devoted to the large company, it's always impressive. But I'm not always convinced, and maybe it's not politically correct in my today hat, but by the big billions. I think that's, again, from time to time, the small and medium innovative industrial companies are providing better leverage, and again, particularly on decarbonization and on how to automate, how to include this 5.0 spirit, which is in fact the combination of it. 5.0, Industry 5.0 is a combination between all the digitalization, all the intelligence that you can provide in the industrial process, with all the environmental constraints, obviously the decarbonization, but also, it has not been mentioned, I think, since the beginning of the day, the recyclability, because industry will not be the same in the future. Also, any product, any production will need to include this element. So it means a lot of changes in the way you organize, obviously, design, produce, and maintain the product. And this is why now everything starts to fit together. If you want to have, I will say, a design including all this concept, you need some intelligence, you need to have a lot of connection, a lot of network. You need to put together your data, I will say, from the past, but also to include some intelligence for the future. When you go into production, you need to have a lot of agility. This is why also the 5G is providing some elements in terms of the networking of the data, but also the real-time operation that you can have. And in the maintenance, I would say this is the same. You have to track, you have to organize yourself in order to recycle, and all these elements are, again, opportunities for changing, obviously, but also for new businesses. And this is where, at France 2030, we would like to stimulate. We like to stimulate the future of our industry, and that's where I would like to. My testimony this morning is around that. I will be ready to discuss further in which specific sector there is things going on, but for example, the last program which has been announced on French Tech 2030 is an interesting program, because it's a combination, as it has been said, tech in fab, and also new approach for industrial small and medium company. I would like to finish on one point which has been already somewhere mentioned, but which is even more important for the smart tech for smart industry here is the education. Because it's great to talk about the it's great to talk about the future of our industry. It's great to talk about this new technology, but you need the competencies in the field. And what I see as one of the main difficulty, if we are moving forward faster than what we are, is the lack of competence. For example, the 5G mission that I'm leading, we see that to have telcos and industrial IT competencies together is extremely rare. And to build these competencies will take time. There are solutions, there are options, but this is important that not only we are, I will say, looking at excellent strategy and so, but also we are preparing the next step on the ground. Okay, so that's for my introduction, what I would like to share with you.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you so much. Paul, you are in charge of the strategy, the market fit and roadmap long-term direction at BrainCube. You are currently improving the efficiency of manufacturing companies, and you propose a unique IoT platform with a ready-to-use industrial solution for optimizing production quality, reducing waste and energy consumption. Please tell us briefly about BrainCube and how to improve efficiency of manufacturing companies, and please share your experience from the challenges you faced and the incredible successes.
Thank you. I think that most of you don't know what we are doing. BrainCube we are a startup, French startup, and we are doing B2B, so a lot of people are talking about B2B startup. We are a tech company, which is basically this slide, but more as this, since 2008, we are accompanying industries in their Industry 4.0 transformation. And there's a lot of technology, but it's mostly a question of change management. You just talk about skills and training, and that's really, really important in your domain. Some numbers to see what we are doing. Basically, we have deployed about 2,000 production line where our software is running, and what we are doing is optimizing this production line. And we do that for many purposes. One of the purposes is energy, CO2 impact, and so on. But I will go in detail in some of the use cases, but we also do waste, we also do a lot of things. We have about 50,000 users on the shop floor to the management of factories and management of international companies. And basically, we get data to do this kind of optimization, and we have something like 3.3 million of connected sensors. It's not IoT devices we are deploying. We are not an hardware provider, where we are a big data provider and software provider. So these sensors are already there. That's really important because when we are talking about data in industry, many industrial think that they don't have the data because they don't put the sensor or things like this. But in fact, as soon as they have an automated production system, they have plenty of data we can get and analyze. Thanks to all diverse optimization, we estimate our impact. I say estimate because it's really hard to calculate, as it's not the focus of the industry company yet. But we estimate about 2 million tons of CO2 we have saved thanks to our optimization since 2008. We are a company based in France. We are in the center of France, Issoire, Clermont-Ferrand. We're also based in Paris for commercial activities, Portland in the USA, and Sao Paulo in Brazil. And we're close to 200 employees. So we passed the 200 employees a couple of weeks ago, with about 70% of international growth currently. Our growth is about 27% a year average since 2008. The main key date for our company development has been the deployment in the States and Brazil. It was in 2009, so something quite old now. and we are part of Gartner, which is a global recognition, particularly in B2B solution. And as a French company, we don't have a lot, so that's, I think, good. Let's talk a bit about energy use case, just to present you what does that mean improving production system in energy and how it serves green gas emission, as an example. When we are in a factory, in fact, there is 3 different places where we can do energy optimization and green gas savings. The first one is about energy transformation, because in fact, the production is using different kind of energy. It can be heat, it can be pressurized air, things like this. So basically, we transform fossil or renewable energy into heat, into steam, into pressurized, and things like this. So this transformation stage, it has a certain yield and it has a certain green gas ratio emission, and we can manage this, optimize this, remove the variability on this, and so on. The second stage is when you are creating the product, you are transforming raw material to finished good, and by doing this, you are consuming energy. And if you are producing things with a high default rate, you're gonna waste energy. Or even if you produce good things, good products, you can have a variability of energy consumption that could be something really important, in fact, on the production line. And the last place is just about assets. Assets are consuming energy. And we have a lot of assets that are running even if nothing is produced. We also have a value usage by organization that could have a big impact of energy. So let's take 3 examples of what we have done with some customer on this to get an illustration. This first example is the production of paper. And it's one factory, and on this factory there's 2 machines to produce paper. And basically for producing their energy, for doing paper, they are using biomass boiler, which is quite interesting for them because they are producing a lot of raw material for this biomass boiler. They are managing raw material, just forestry, wood, and things like this. This biomass boiler is something that is a bit complex to manage. And it's also a bit complex to manage because that one was at the beginning natural gas system, and it has been transformed to a biomass working. By doing some optimization on the way this system is working, for this unique site, we basically had a yield increase from 42% to 58%, which basically means 38% of increase. And this is basically saving 2.5 million cubic meter natural gas per year, which is 1.2 million euros saved for the industry. And it's also 30% green gas emission less for that single site, which is quite interesting. And the second scope, which is more on the transformation itself, let's take another example. It's a sugar, beet powder, and beet pulp pellets that are for animal food. And they have dryers. So they are air dryer, and these dryer are working with natural gas. And it's basically cost 24 million euros per year for using this boiler for the industry. And thanks to the optimization we have been able to make on that production system, we basically saved 3.5 million cubic meter of natural gas per year, which is basically 1.8 million euros and 7.5 of green gas emission reduction. The last example, which looked like a bit stupid in a certain way, is an automotive assembly line. Automated assembly line for animal food. No, I think it's an automotive assembly line, and animal food should not be this line. So it's an automotive assembly line. And basically, it's copy and paste from previous line. New concept is when you use renewable material for building cars, you can do something like this. Yeah. So there's 5 shop floor in this industry and about 900 different equipment. And this factory is working 5 days a week, which basically means there's 2 days where nothing is produced. but it's exactly like the lights you forget to switch off when you leave your office. Part of those 900 machines stay up during all the weekend. And by just monitoring this, so I mean, it's not IEA things and big data thing, it's just doing monitoring, sharing indicator and all this stuff, you achieve 5% of energy saving, which is $500,000 of cost less for the industry. I don't have the equivalent in terms of CO2 because I don't know the mix of energy, but I let you imagine that it's that's also of green gas. So, up to open discussion and
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. And now, please ask your questions. Any question?
When you help your customers, I guess that it's kind of algorithms that you implement, and I guess as well that you are getting the customer data somewhere. Where the data are being processed? Is it the cloud or is it the customer data center?
What is interesting in this is before being in Brandcube, I worked in the industry for 18 years, and industry data is very sensitive. Not just personal data, but it's secret of production and things like this. And what is interesting with Brandcube is that even in 2008, where cloud did not really exist, we had been able to convince industrial to factories to give us their data for being processed in all cloud. So that's quite interesting, and the reason is simple. There is so much value in doing that kind of processing that it's interesting to do it. So that was in 2008 and what we say. What we see today in the industry is that most of the industrial companies are going to cloud and are on cloud. So what are they asking to us is usually to deploy an instance of our service into their own tenant in AWS, Azure, GCP. So yeah, most of the data is processed in the cloud. I think we have one company which is in defense aerospace, which has on-premise solution, disconnected solution. But all the others, they are on the cloud solution, can be all cloud, which is a private cloud, or public cloud.
Have you got your answer on this one?
Yes, I will ask later for some other questions.
But I wanted to take the opportunity much more to add on the are you getting enough data or not? And take an example which I would like to share with you is for me, it struck me. A lot of people are thinking, I don't have enough IoT, I don't have enough sensor and so, and in my particular case, they are not 5G already or 5G. And I would like to share with you an example of Alcatel Submarine Networks, where they were looking for data and they were not having this data. So one guy said, okay, we'll try to get an IoT, but it was not available. Another one said, oh, we will put 2 cameras with some intelligence on the data which is come. And in fact, they did it because on one of the production machines, they had some deficiency from time to time that they were not able to track what was the problem. And in fact, after 2 weeks of getting this image data, they were able, through some intelligence, obviously, to get, I would say, the same effect as a sensor. So the message here is, yes, it's important to have a lot of data. Yes, it's even better to have a sensor, intelligent sensor, and cloud and everything. But it should not, I will say that if you don't have them, you are not able to move forward and to go one step further in I would say, energy efficiency or many other elements. It's important now with the ability of getting intelligent on many devices, you can get the answer or you can get the beginning of the answer. And it is important to look at that for the industry. And smart industry is this one, is the industry taking advantage of all the means and all the elements which are available, adding some intelligence, going to the cloud in order to get the information, or the opposite, stay on the field, but it should be an open innovation within the industrial process, and then you will see that you can move forward very fast. It was a message more than an answer.
And again, from the startup perspective, this is a fantastic opportunity because now it's not only the question how do you optimize and raise the data inside one company, but the new challenge is basically, we heard to this morning, ecosystems. I mean, in Germany, I think most people are now obsessed with the, for example, Supply Chain Act. So you actually, it's not a luxury to have this data, it's a must-have. So actually, there's a lot of initiative, and I see increasingly also, I mean, not strange, for example, in France, I see data processing, innovative data processing companies, very strong companies from France, and also cybersecurity companies. And they have this problem, or that they have the opportunity to work also in Europe, because this is a European legislation, for example, the Supply Chain Act. And so I think that there are a lot of issues to be solved, and there's a broad field for startups, and European startups, I would call it. So I think there's a bright future on this side, not only for you, but also for the ecosystem.
The last question.
Thank you, Thomas Weyer from Business France. In this term of transition, digital transition, where is a decision maker will facilitate the first decision in the organization? In Germany would be very useful, because somebody talk about not technology for future, but future networks. So where are the alliance, the potential alliance of decision makers inside the industry decision maker chain? And what's the main challenge for him or for her?
So I think it's probably not so different than in France, but what you can see is an evolution. I mean, I would say that it might be through legislation. I recently met a startup who's actually saying that before they were working at the department stage to provide, and then there was a whole move to have digital offices, let's say, but that's like a marketing function in the organization. Now you can see really that data is so important. Actually, for example, data security needs to be signed by the board that you have these structures, but it's moving really much higher to the organization. That's one thing I only can say as an observation. It might not be general, but it's definitely moving up the chain.
What I see particularly related to data is and the new future industry, it's at the CEO level. I don't know, Brent, where is your decision maker?
In fact, what is interesting is that it's totally changing. In 2008, and I think from 2008 to 2020 or 2018, something like this, it was more at the factory level. So basically, we were discussing with a factory manager that have problem to solve. And so the protectors say, okay, we have this quality issue, we have this energy consumption issue, and we need your help to solve this. And basically, we deploy your solution at factories and factories per factories. Since around 2018, what has changed is that corporate are interested in this. And my idea of this is being part of industry. I think that during 20 to 2020, basically, we have made a lot of transformation on supply chain, logistics, finance, all these things, and the industry was a bit put on the side. But since 2018, around this period of time, the industry 4.0 transformation start to appear at the corporate level, and now we are more working with corporate for global deployment of companies instead of suites of different factories. So that's a major change. What is also changing, but it's really more from this year, in my point of view, is that because at the corporate level it was more ITs plus OTs working together. But now there is a green gas impact and energy reduction and so on. So that's another level of decision also, and corporate really makes a link between economics, that was targeted previously, and impact on environment. That is really something important for industry.